Hello, I'm Mark Crutcher. Welcome to Life Talk for May 2017. Boy, the time flies, doesn't it?
Yeah, it sure does.
I'm joined here by our wonderful pastor from Fair Park Bible Church in Dallas, Pastor
Well, it's
Stephen
good to
Broden.
be here today.
It's nice to have you here. And it's good to be anywhere, right?
Yeah.
Our age, it's good to be anywhere.
Absolutely.
That's what I always do. I get up in the morning and read the Dallas paper and look at the obituaries. If I'm not in there, I get to work.
Right.
Oh,
I'm
my.
sorry you have to look to find that out.
Yeah, that's right. Well, anyway, and of course, we're also joined by my trusty sidekick, Renee Hobbs. From
Good morning.
Lifetime Happenings. How are you?
Great.
All right, we started out the other day putting the show together, and we were concerned, you and I were concerned that we didn't have enough material.
Oh.
And then before we got done, we were having to leave
We have
material out.
plenty of material
So
today.
we're really jammed with stuff today. First off, you know, we've talked recently in the last few shows about this idiocy that's going on all over the world, here in the United States and other places, with declaring non-persons persons. And see, this was the stage for Roe versus Wade, as they said the unborn child is not a person, therefore they're not protected by the Constitution. It's pure nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
But now we're seeing this effort. We talked about it, I think, on last month's show. They're saying robots now may be persons. Remember that conversation we had?
Yes, we did. We talked about that.
And then your buddy, Tomi the chimp,
Yeah, that was a previous show, I think. Yeah, Tomi and Kiko.
Kiko, his
Yes,
girlfriend.
right.
But anyway, this is before the New York Supreme Court right now
Mm-hmm.
to declare Tomi and Kiko human beings. I mean, persons.
Right.
And I guess, they get to vote and they
They
can
do
drive
all
a car.
right, all of that stuff that we do. Yeah.
Tomi and Kiko will be out driving around and, they'll have
Right.
a little home out in the suburbs. And
I know, pay their bills, work.
anyway, we laugh about it, but it's not funny because it's this concept that has killed 60 million babies so far, that they're not persons. And now we're going to grant personhood to chimps and robots. Robots we can actually make a person in a laboratory because we can make a robot. Well, just when you thought it couldn't get any dumber, New Zealand and India, they're not considering this. They have already done it. They have ruled, the government in New Zealand and India has ruled that rivers, little places
Yeah,
where
right.
water flows,
Yes.
right? They are
Evelyn
persons.
Brooks.
They are persons for purposes of the law.
It's sad because, I understand the natural flow of water and not messing with the natural flow of the water. I get all of that. Let nature take its place, but they don't have organs. They don't, have a beating heart.
And rivers change naturally. They change flow.
Right.
They're saying now because they're persons. They're saying, listen to this. This is what Rikwak Duda, a lawyer who specializes in these issues, says. It is an extension of the philosophy of allowing a river to flow freely as was intended by its nature. Any interference with a river as a whole, including construction of dams, takes away from its essential and basic character. Well, what about killing an unborn child?
Right.
Does that interfere with the natural process
Right.
and take away its natural basic character?
Right, and whoever wrote this article was right on because we're putting a dam, abortion is putting a dam in the uterus of a woman and killing that baby. And there's no life after that, just like there would be no life if you put a dam up and the water can't flow freely.
It's legitimizing absurdity.
Yeah, right.
In our culture and in our world today, juxtaposed to the murder of children. It's crazy on the surface.
Well,
Yes, it is.
Stephen, isn't it what Scripture tells us in Revelation? Good will be bad, and bad will be good. Up will be down, left will be right. All those sort of. That's where we
precisely
are.
that's where we are.
So a river and a chimpanzee are
Have
persons.
value, have worth, and dignity.
Right.
But a child does not.
But an
Child
unborn child
doesn't.
doesn't.
Yeah.
Right.
It's astonishing.
Yes, it is.
The culture we live in today. Here's an interesting thing. In Maryland, a new Maryland law is designed to fund Planned Parenthood. And they're not going to raise new taxes to pay for this. They're going to take $2 million out of programs for low-income families. And you're going to take that money out of there and give it to Planned Parenthood in Maryland.
yeah.
And the Republican governor of the state
Yes.
allowed it to become law.
Yes, he did,
Wouldn't
which
we-
is sickening. And they're taking money away from legitimate health care centers.
Right.
Legitimate to give to Planned Parenthood.
And an additional $700,000 beyond the $2 million they're going to take eventually away from programs designed to help low
Well, they can rationalize doing that For them, that's an investment.
Right.
An investment because they're controlling population. That's $2 million that go to controlling population,
Especially black population.
black population.
Yep, exactly. That's what we've seen, and that's what we documented in MAFA 21, which
Precisely.
you were one of the stars of. Or you told me you were the star.
Well, I was just on a small ego trip there.
Yeah, you told me you were the star of MAFA 21. That was the claim.
Yeah, and you patted my back when I said that.
Yeah, well, I felt sorry for you. Hey, anyway, speaking of feeling sorry for people, Tomi Lahren, she was kind of the darling of the Christian right, pro-lifers, and now she comes out and announces that she's a pro-abort, or she says pro-choice.
It's pro-choice, yeah.
And she has, in my view, completely destroyed whatever future she had.
Yes.
I think that she was being groomed for much bigger things
Right.
out in the public, and she comes out with this. And I want to read this deal, what she said. And she was on the Blaze, young lady, tremendous following, very articulate, very attractive. She had everything in the world going for her.
And she's suing the Blaze now, which Glenn Beck is now turning around and suing her,
Yeah,
countersuing.
she sued them. Now they're suing her.
Right.
But nobody's going to pick her up, because what this woman does not understand is the way the godless left in this country operates. And she can come out and espouse their views on something like abortion, and they will still never embrace her. So she walked away from the career that she was building on the conservative, pro-life Christian side. She abandoned that, and she didn't get anything for it. And now she's out just floating around.
Well, do you know what the danger is with all of this? Is that when she was 21 and she had just graduated from college, she already had a television show
Right.
already given to her. And it kind of reminds me of the people that work at abortion clinics when they come out and they're showcased all around.
Right.
All around the United States or wherever. It's dangerous because
it
she
is.
doesn't have the education. She doesn't have the experience and all of that.
Right. It is. You're right. And of course, in my book, Siege, I talk about the idiocy of the pro-life movement that takes these people that walk out of the abortion clinic onto the sidewalk and say, I can't do it anymore. And
Right.
2 weeks later, they're a national leader in the pro-life movement.
Yeah, and that's what they made out of Tomi Lahren.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, she was on The View, which I don't know why you'd be on that nonsense anyway. She says, I'm pro-choice, and here's why. I'm a constitutional, someone that loves the Constitution. I'm someone that's for limited government, so I can't sit here and be a hypocrite and say I'm for limited government, but I think the government should decide what women do with their bodies. I can sit here and say that as a Republican, and I can say, what I'm for, limited government, so stay out of my guns, and you can stay out of my body as well, unquote. This girl is hopelessly confused. First off, she's confused about what it means to be a conservative. Limited government does not mean anything goes. It has never meant that.
Well, limited government, they still protect murderers and rapists
Right.
and
Yeah. But the bigger problem here is not only has she been exposed as a fake conservative, she's been exposed as a phony Christian. And I'll say it again, you cannot be a Christian that she claims to be and be pro-choice on abortion. You cannot do it.
agreed.
What it is lack of training and lack of mentoring.
Right.
Because she had this talent and she was gifted, she was anointed without the depth of knowledge.
There's a shortcut.
That's happening all over the pro-life movement.
Right.
That's also happening in the church.
Yeah, it
because
is.
someone is charismatic and does not have the theological training or the gift of interpretation, that is communicating the Word of God, but has a charisma.
Right. All of a sudden, you can get millions of people
Right.
following you.
Exactly.
But let's make sure people understand why I say that you cannot claim to be pro-choice and a Christian. You can be one or the other, but you can't be both at the same time.
Right.
First off, and we've got a noted, famed theologian right here in front of us, so you can correct me where I'm wrong, which I won't be, but anyway, you can. Right. Is Christian doctrine that God is the author of life? Is that what we say?
Absolutely.
That God creates every life? Is that Christian doctrine?
Yes,
That's
it is.
Christian doctrine.
Do we believe that God can make mistakes? Do you believe God's ever made a mistake?
No.
No.
Is it possible for him to make a mistake?
No.
No.
Because if he does something, that's the way it was supposed to be done. Even if we think it was a mistake, it wasn't, just because we think it was. If God is the author of life and he doesn't make mistakes, then the only conclusion you can draw from that is that when a life exists in the womb, it is God's will that it be there. right?
That's right.
If it wasn't his will that it be there, it wouldn't be there.
Precise.
So when your support for legal abortion denies that reality, it denies the reality that the child that's in that womb was created by God and it's his will to be there. But I want to bring up another issue that we haven't, I don't know if we've ever talked about this on the show or not, but I'm rewriting my answers book right now, and this is one of the things that I'm putting in it. I'll ask you, Stephen, would you say, if I showed you, if we had a 3-year-old or a 5-year-old little girl here, and I said, that's a child of God, would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
That is a child of God. When did she become a child of God?
At conception.
Was she not a child of God when she was in the womb?
She is.
Right.
And was.
So you see a newborn baby, and you say, yes, that's a child of God. Are you telling me that 30 minutes ago it wasn't a child of God? What was it then? And we need to start thinking about this theological argument of if we see these children or adults as children of God, when did they become children of God? And it is totally preposterous to say that it could have become a child of God at any time other than the moment of fertilization. At that second, it had to be a child of God because that's the only time it can be.
Well, I'm going to go a step further and say that even at creation, God knew
Right.
when we were going to be born and
who we were going to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, he knew about you 1,000 years ago.
Yeah.
Right? And he knows about babies that are going to be born 1,000 years from now. Right?
That's right.
And he manifests them
Right.
at the right time.
Right.
And it's in the manifestation that the reality becomes that which is tangible and
Right.
understood.
That we can
Yes,
see.
that we can see.
Right.
But in the mind of God.
But again, isn't that a good question?
I
To
think
ask,
it is absolutely an essential question
when did that child become a child of God?
for those of us who are taking on the mantle
Right.
of speaking in the public square. We need to have this kind of theological training. Otherwise, we get what we got here.
We have this girl,
That's
Tomi
what we
Lahren.
get.
I would
Who
love
begins
to,
to rationalize in her mind, that I'm a constitutionalist, and she didn't say constitutionalist. She says I'm a constitutional. I'm a constitutionalist, and constitutionalist believes in limited government. Limited government means that government is nowhere to be found in any aspect of my life and living, which is erroneous on the surface.
that's bad theology, but it's also bad government because
Bad
that's not the way this
That's not what
government
it is.
founded.
When we say limited government, the government is restricted by the Constitution to the definitions specified in it
Right. And
as to what the duties are.
persons, according to the Fifth and 14th Amendment, persons have a federal right to life that the government is obliged to protect.
Right.
You cannot sit here and call yourself a constitutionalist, as she's trying to do, and then say, but I support legal abortion, because that child is a person. I don't care what anybody
She
says.
just didn't know what she was talking
And
about.
I'm going to tell you what else. Children are not mistakes that God made that we have the right to kill.
Now, as we look at her fault, and we should look at her fault and expose it for what it is, but we cannot excuse the mentors, those who grabbed a hold of her and saw that potential and set her out there
Right.
without the kind of training and development that is required for her to be effective in that role.
And the maturity.
So it's both and I don't want us to miss that.
Right, and
because
that's
I
what
think
you
there-
were-
the culpability is not only with her.
Right.
It's also with Mr. Beck.
Well, and it's also, that's one of the reasons we're making some of the changes we're going to be making here, because we've got to educate the older pro-lifers like me, the people that have been around for 35 or 40 years like me. We have a duty.
And me.
And you. But we have a duty to educate the next generation, and we're not doing that
Absolutely,
right now.
absolutely. And you've said that before on this show.
Right, yeah, that's right.
That there's a screaming need, a desperate need for that to happen because we're going to be around for a while.
Yeah, that's right.
And these young people who are coming up who are moved emotionally is good.
Right.
But we've got to take that emotion and channel it into effective training and development.
Right.
So that our legacy will go on beyond our years.
Right. Well, just using you for example, look at all the stuff you know now that you didn't know 6 years ago.
I know. It's unfortunate. But yeah, I mean, I've learned a lot, and there's still a whole lot more to learn. This issue is gigantic.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
In California, students at the University of Berkeley, some students there, the Students United for Reproductive Justice at Berkeley, they have now petitioned the school to make abortion pills available on campus for the students. And they think it's an outrage that this is not happening. Now they've actually gone to the state legislature and asking for a bill to be proposed doing the same thing. And a state senator has introduced a bill which would require California colleges and universities that use state funding, they must provide abortion pills.
Because it's
campus.
such an inconvenience for these girls to drive hours away to get an abortion pill.
Or minutes
And
away.
and
Yeah.
there's only two pills that they have to take, one 24 hours and one 48 hours, and they're complaining about that because it's only a pill.
Right.
And do you know the danger of this? If girls go out and, let's say, party or whatever and sleep with people and get pregnant, and I'm not saying that that's the only way
Right.
that they go about getting pregnant here, but if there's an abortion clinic or a clinic around the corner that they can just go and get the RU486, do you know how many possibly, and this is what goes through my head, how many babies they may find in toilets or
Right. Because what
restaurants, or, I mean, just because it's a spontaneous abortion.
and we're seeing a gigantic increase in that. We've seen this over the last few years. We've talked about it here on previous shows, the number of babies they find in toilets or in junior high school restrooms
Right.
and things like that.
Or how many boys are going to drag their girlfriends to the clinic to get a pill, whether they like it or not? I mean,
Yep.
there's
I
just...
think that here again is another story behind the story. This kind of story is indicative of the lack of moral development and moral sensitivity on the part of the millennials.
Yep.
They are operating on an amoral system,
Right.
'Cause
which
it's about
produces
them.
a behavior that is self-destructive and is deleterious to
Yep.
the survival of our culture.
And let's make a point, though, that you were making a moment ago and what you were kind of referring to as well. It's not the fault of the millennials. It's the fault of their parents. And it's the fault of this culture that is fostering this sort of mental attitude.
That's
Yeah.
the key word,
Yeah.
fostering. There are 5 institutions that influence us in America: academia, education, business, corporations, media, government, the family, and the church. And all of them have embraced, unfortunately, the human secular mantra.
Well, the biggest problem I see, and we don't want to go down this trail too much, is that the church looks at all those others. Instead of all those others looking at the church as their beacon, the church looks at them and molds their message to comply with that.
It's called political correctness.
That's exactly what it's called. Here's a disturbing story or I find it very disturbing. We've talked recently, and we've seen this habit, this thing going on in the culture where what I call the godless left in this country. And believe me, the problem that we have in America today is godlessness. That is the root cause of everything that's going on in this country. And most of that godlessness is being promoted by the American left. The godless left in this country is trying to eliminate any type of pro-life speech. We see this on college campuses where they destroy any effort to have a pro-life presence on the college campus. These people claim that they very much believe in free speech. They're the biggest pathological liars in our society. They do not. They only believe in free speech that they agree with.
Yeah.
That's in Massachusetts. Now, we've dealt with this. We've even talked about this on a show some time ago. There's an organization called Copley Advertising, and you and I had some conversations with the guy that runs the thing, John Flynn. And what they do is some new technology that's coming out called Geo-Fencing. And what this is they can target an area, and in this case, it would be an abortion clinic. And they can send a message to any smartphone being carried by people that walk into that facility. So you could have a pro-life group, and this is what they called us about. They wanted us to get on board with this, and I think it's a great idea. I said at the time it's a great idea. I just didn't think the technology was where it needed to be.
Yeah, right.
So that's why we didn't do it then.
Right.
But I said on this show, this is going to eventually be a big tool for the pro-life movement because a woman walks into this abortion clinic, and it's like an extension of the sidewalk counselors. They only get to talk to her between the time that she gets out of the car and she gets to the front door of the abortion mill. And sometimes they don't even get that. Now, through their smartphones, we'd be able to send them a message saying, listen, before you have this abortion, we can offer you help or we can offer you alternatives or whatever it might be. And this company is in the forefront of developing this geofencing technology, and it's being used in, I've told y'all, I saw a show on how Walmart is going to be using this to get new customers. The state of Massachusetts the state's Democratic Attorney General, Maura Healey, began to threaten this company. Now, they have never used this in Massachusetts yet.
I know.
That's the weird thing.
I know.
But she started threatening this company. And she says that basically this geofencing technology is to harass these women going in for medical care. And so they were going to apparently file charges against these people, and Copley backed down and agreed to not use
Medical facilities.
the geofencing in medical facilities in Massachusetts, even though they'd never done it up to that point. And subsequent to that now, they've abandoned the whole project. And you talked to the guy, tried to get him to come on the show and talk about it.
I
He
did.
didn't want to.
Yeah, we talked via email.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
He's under some pretty hard lawsuits right now.
And this is purely 100% a free speech issue.
Yep.
But the state of Massachusetts is threatening this guy, apparently with jail time, saying if you try to talk to these women going into these abortion clinics through their cell phones. Now, if he was sending them hardcore pornography,
That would be one thing.
these people would be the ones defending him, defending his right to do it. But they're saying that you're harassing these women if you send them a deal saying, hey, we've got alternatives for you, or maybe you want to rethink this situation, come out on the sidewalk, we'll be able to help you. So they have done a preemptive strike on his First Amendment rights. And unfortunately, the company cratered, even though they agreed that they had broken no laws and that they agreed also that they had been singled out. The problem here is not only the obvious naked assault on the First Amendment rights of these pro-life organizations that might use this and on this Copley advertising company, but this is an example. Those of us who are in the pro-life movement understand how vicious and nasty and disgusting these godless leftists can be. And we just accept that when you get into this and you're going to fight this, and I had to have this conversation with you when you first came here and you've seen it firsthand. So we're accustomed to it and we accept it. The reason Mr. Flynn cratered is because he's not used to it. He's not part of the pro-life movement. He was doing this as a service. He wanted to operate a business that you could purchase a service and do geofencing. And I think geofencing is a coming technology that could be very helpful here.
Right.
I'm telling you something. This woman, Maura Healey, who's the state Democratic Attorney General, she ought to be in prison. She has denied the constitutional rights of not only this company's free speech rights, but also of anybody that would use the services of that company.
Right.
And this is just another example.
Right, they're redefining the First Amendment right before our eyes. It's happening on college campuses.
Right.
It's happening all over our culture by the left.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly what's happening.
And I don't think we're recognizing it.
That's right.
Exactly what is happening, and to challenge it. He needed to challenge this in the court.
Right.
He does. And
But he does, and he would obviously win. But anyway, if he's part of the pro-life movement, he would.
He would. Yeah.
But he's not part of the pro-life movement. He didn't sign up for this, and whereas you signed up for it, I signed up for it, you signed up for it, everybody's in the pro-life movement. This is what we signed up for.
Right.
Okay, speaking of the pro-life movement, there's some things going on here, and we've seen this before. I've talked to you about it, how this has occurred in past generations of the pro-life movement. We've got a lot of internal dissent from people who are attacking the pro-life movement.
it's unfortunate.
And it's very unfortunate. And some of these people are crazy as drugstore rats, but it doesn't matter. They've got a platform out there. People actually listen to these nitwits. But they're viciously attacking the pro-life movement, and some of them have viciously attacked members of the pro-life movement, including me,
Yes.
and including Life
Life
Dynamics,
Dynamics.
by name.
Yes.
And their basic argument is, and they are literally saying, that the pro-life movement should be disbanded, and that the pro-life movement should go away, and that the pro-life movement has failed and has accomplished nothing.
And we're in for the money.
Well, yeah, though there's so much money in here, and I'm not going to ever go out and talk about in public, but you know, if anybody thinks that I'm in this for the money, they have no idea what I walked away from and where I would be in my life today. You know that.
I know that very
Right.
well.
But that's irrelevant. That doesn't matter. I feel privileged and honored and blessed that God called me to this, and that, yeah, I've made mistakes, and the whole pro-life movement's made mistakes. We're human beings. We're not going to be perfect. But these people are out here saying, literally, that the pro-life movement should be disbanded, and that we ought to just walk away from it. and that the only way to do this stuff, to try to stop the killing of the unborn, is to follow them over the ledge, basically, is what they're saying.
Can you imagine where we would be without the pro-life movement?
That's what I wanted to talk about.
I know you're getting into that.
Right. I wrote an article some years ago because I saw this. I wrote it for a different reason. I wrote it because I saw people in the pro-life movement being kind of despondent over the fact that the killing goes on. We've done all the things we've done, and we still haven't. In their view, they didn't think we'd accomplished that much. I want to just go over a few things quickly here. In 1992, when I started Life Dynamics, that's my benchmark. In 1992, I'd already been in the pro-life movement for a long, long time, but that's when I started Life Dynamics, so I'll start right there. At that time, there were over 2,100 freestanding abortion clinics in the United States, 2,100. And they were doing 1.7 million abortions a year, 1.7 million babies dying in these 2,100 abortion clinics. Today, there are fewer than 600. I think it's like 550. You keep up with
Something like 551 or
something like that.
Yeah.
Fewer than 600. So in other words, 2/3 of the abortion clinics in this country have shut down since 1992. The abortion rate has gone from 1.7 million to just under 1 million last year.
Still
Now,
a lot of babies.
Lots of babies, and it's a national obscenity. It's pornographic. It's a disgrace that we're killing 1 million babies a year. But we're not killing 1.7 million babies a year. And I'm going to tell you, that happened because of the pro-life movement. Absolutely. Anybody who thinks that that would have happened spontaneously is a nitwit. I mean, they're crazy. This happened because of the pro-life movement. And there's a lot of people in the pro-life movement and a lot of groups that I don't agree with, that I don't like the things they're doing. But I would never come out in the public and attack them and say they've accomplished nothing, they're not doing anything, they're in it for the money, they're in it for the fame and the glory and all that. That would be an obscenity if I did that.
Right.
And yet that's what these people are doing. And I want to make sure people understand something. If the pro-life movement had never existed, first off, there would be no national debate on abortion. The rights of the unborn would not even be discussed. If the pro-life movement wasn't out here discussing them, who would be discussing them? And I think, I don't think this is a theory, I think it's an absolute fact, and some pro-aborts have even said this. I think if there had not been for the pro-life movement, there would be Planned Parenthood facilities and freestanding abortion clinics in every mall in this country, just like these eyeglass places where you go in and get glasses. That used to not be the case. Used to, eyeglass places were separate businesses. Now they're in malls.
And colleges and junior colleges. I mean, everywhere.
They'd be everywhere.
Yeah.
And, you know, we see in malls nowadays, you see chiropractors and you see other things that are kind of remotely related.
People that give massages. Sure.
Related to the medical community. There'd be abortion clinics in every mall in this country if it weren't for the pro-life movement. And I saw a thing not 2 months ago from some pro-abort saying that they want to start doing a project to put Planned Parenthood facilities in malls. So don't think they wouldn't do this. This is right up their alley. And as you were referencing a moment ago, I think every school in this country, junior high on up, I think every school in this country would either have an on-site health clinic that did abortions, or they'd have a contract with a local abortionist. I think every one of them would. If it had not been for the pro-life movement, there'd be no debate about taxpayer funding of abortion. We would have been forced to pay for them from day one.
And here's the unspoken truth, is that it was done with paper clips and bubble gum,
What do you mean?
not with a whole lot of money.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You're
Not
talking
with a
about
whole
the
lot
pro-life
of money.
movement.
Yeah, the pro-life
Right.
movement. We didn't have a whole
Compared
lot
to
of
the
money.
other side.
Oh, yeah.
Right, the other side is
Right.
just dripping with money.
Right.
Taxpayer funded.
Planned Parenthood alone, just
Right.
on the federal level, gets $500 million a year.
Exactly.
And a lot of that money winds up in the political process.
And so the influence of the movement has been powerful
And let me tell
with
you,
little resources.
yeah, had it not been for the pro-life movement, you know, we saw this ad in France that the French government's now banned because it showed happy Down syndrome children that were not aborted. And we see these efforts in the United States. And I've been around Down syndrome children. Y'all been around. They're happy. Yes, they have problems, and we wouldn't wish those problems on anybody. And you know what? If it hadn't been for the pro-life movement, we wouldn't have to look at those faces anymore.
That's right.
You know why? Because they'd all be
They
killed in
wouldn't
the
be.
womb.
Yeah, there wouldn't be any.
There wouldn't be any. When a child was diagnosed with potentially having Down syndrome, the default position would automatically be abortion.
Right.
It almost is right now. 97% of all children diagnosed with Down syndrome are executed in the womb for no reason other than the fact that they have Down syndrome. So you don't think it would have risen 3% if the pro-life movement didn't exist?
Yeah. Well, just a small little story is when I was 20 weeks pregnant with my daughter, they thought there were things going on with her, and I had to go in and do special testing. And that was their first default position was you can always terminate. If you find out that there's something wrong with your daughter, you can always terminate.
Right. My wife and I went through that with our daughter that eventually was born and died. And that was suggested. And I guarantee you, my response made that guy wish he'd never brought that up. But that's another story. Anyway, and let me tell you something else. Had it not been for the pro-life movement, there would be no crisis pregnancy center network out there. So women would not have any alternatives that they could go to if they didn't want to have an abortion. If they didn't want to have an abortion, they were going to have it. It didn't matter. And the list goes on and on. But the bottom line is, without the pro-life movement, I guarantee you this is true. We would now be a country, we would have devolved into a country where the killing of an unborn child has no more moral significance than pulling a tooth.
I believe that.
It's not a matter of belief, it's a fact. Because we're almost there now with an active pro-life movement. Now, if you think I'm exaggerating about this, we did some research on this. This was long before you even came here. In the early 1920s, the Soviet Union became the first industrialized nation on earth to legalize abortion. And there was no pro-life effort allowed. There was no anti-abortion effort allowed in the Soviet Union. Now, years later, almost about the time they were breaking up in 1989, the Soviets were noticing a lot of health problems with women in that country, massive health problems. And some people suggested it might be because of abortion, and they did it. There were studies done in the Soviet Union. And I'm telling you, when I saw that originally, and it was many years ago, it was stunning. In the Soviet Union, they're admitting, the government's admitting, that the average Soviet woman had 9 abortions during her childbearing years. 9 abortions on average. 90% of all first pregnancies in the Soviet Union ended in abortion. 90% of all first pregnancies.
So sad.
60% of all subsequent pregnancies ended in abortion. And many others ended in abortion that weren't counted in the official statistics because they were either illegal or they were unreported. But 90% of all first pregnancies, 60% of all subsequent pregnancies. They found places in the Soviet Union where it was not uncommon for women to have 25 to 30 abortions. 28, they said, was about the right number in those particular parts of the Soviet Union.
I can't even imagine.
And the Russian government now, the Soviet Union is gone, of course, but Russia is still there, and they're saying that the health consequences from this have been absolutely catastrophic. They're pointing to all these health problems that they had for women in that country at their high abortion rate. And demographers and economists are now saying, and we bring up here occasionally, you talk about a lot, the video Demographic Winter. And again, I want to encourage everybody to watch that video because it'll shock you what you see, what's going on in this world. But there are demographers out there and economists predicting that the collapse of the Russian economy, because of this, they're not replacing their birth rate, they're not replacing their population, is going to cause their economy to collapse. And and some people are saying it's happening right now. And this goes on and on. But the point is, this is what happens in a country where you have no pro-life movement, where you have no opposition to abortion. Because when you don't have opposition, you don't have restraint. And if you think the abortion industry, the American abortion industry, is going to restrain itself,
You're not a chance.
you're not a $1,000 airplane ride to reality if you think that that's what would happen. And I want to bring up some stuff when we talk about what the pro-life movement has done and not done. I've talked to you about how much different the pro-life landscape was back in the early 90s when you had Bill Clinton as president, and he never saw an abortion he didn't like. And look who he's married to, and we just dodged that bullet, right? Janet Reno, raging pro-abort, godless degenerate, this Attorney General of the United States. They were cracking the skulls of pro-lifers back in the early 90s. They were eliminating the pro-life movement, and Bill Clinton made some statements out on the campaign trail basically saying that. At one stop he made here in Dallas, he was being heckled by some pro-lifers, and the pro-abort started jumping on the pro-lifer, and he said, "Don't worry about them. We'll take care of them once I'm in office." What do you think the message in that was? And sure enough, within days after he took over, he appoints Janet Reno, and they begin cracking skulls of pro-lifers. At that time, our abortion rate was 5,000 a day. It's now under 3,000. That's still an obscenity. But think about this. We look at these numbers and we forget that there's a human component to this. If the abortion rate went in America from 5,000 to 3,000, as horrible as the 3,000 is, that means 2,000 babies aren't being killed. So today, just if we compare it to what it would have been like in 1992 and 1993, if we still had that abortion rate, 2,000 babies more would be killed today than are going to be killed. So tomorrow morning, there'll be 2,000 babies in this country that are still alive and are going to go to term and live their lives that would have been butchered in 1992. And I'm going to tell you something else. Actually, the numbers are much more than that, because the abortion rate would not have gone from 5,000 to 3,000 without the pro-life movement. It would have gone from 5,000 to 10,000 or 12,000 or 15,000 a day. We don't know where it would go. But I'll tell you what I do know. Without the pro-life movement, yes, we're standing on the graves of 60 million babies right now, this nation is. Standing on the graves of 60 million of its own babies. Without the pro-life movement, that number would be 150 million or 250 million or God knows what. We don't know what it would be. But it would have mirrored the Soviet Union. I guarantee you, because that is the prototype for what happens in a nation where you legalize abortion and you have no opposition to it. It just runs rampant.
Well, let me ask you a question.
Okay.
How do you explain this criticism?
Very simple. If you go to a Cowboy football game, the experts that know how to win that game are not on the field. They're not the players, and they're not the coaches, right? They're the people sitting in the stands. The guy that sits in the stands with the $125 Cowboy jersey that he just bought at the concession stand or at the gift store, he's the expert if you listen to him, right? But he's not down on that field getting a bloody nose. He's not down on that field covered in dust and blood and sweat and tears and God knows what, right? But he knows everything there is to know. He can walk, if the Cowboys lose a game, he can walk out of that stadium and tell you, well, if they'd have just listened to me and done this, they'd have won that game, right? All the experts are sitting up in the bleachers, the guys who really know what they're doing. I don't know why Jerry Jones doesn't fire Jason Garrett and just bring these people down out of the stands. They know what they're doing. You know what it's like? It's like, have you ever noticed, and we all have children. You've got 3. I don't even know how many children you have.
3.
3, okay, and I have 1. But she's like 3 or 4, you know. When it was time to raise her, it was like 3 or 4. But have you ever noticed that the people who know exactly how to raise children don't have any? Have you ever noticed that?
I have.
Yeah, they can tell you
personally.
exactly what you're doing wrong. They can tell you well, if I had kids, they'd get 1 hour of TV a week. That's all they'd get. And they wouldn't have a cell phone, and they wouldn't have this. And you know,
Everything's structured and scheduled. That's
And
not the way it works with
this
kids.
is the perfect world, right? And if they had children, that's the way they would be. And it's like people who've been married 3 or 4 times and divorced 3 or 4 times. They can tell you how to stay married and have a happy marriage, right? You hear this. It's those who can do, those who can't teach, right? You've heard that philosophy.
Right.
But that's okay. That's human nature. Let them go ahead and do what they want to do. But I'm just telling you that the mainstream pro-life movement needs to be very wary of what's going on out there, because these are attempts by people who call themselves Christians and have very unchristian-like behaviors, who call themselves pro-lifers who have very un-pro-life-like behaviors, and they could destroy the pro-life movement from within. The pro-aborts will never destroy us. If the pro-aborts could destroy the pro-life movement, they already would have. They've had all the money. They've had academia on their side. They've had Hollywood on their side. They've had the political process on their side. They've had everything in the world that you can name. They've had all the advantages, and here we are, we're winning. The pro-aborts can never destroy us. These are the dangerous people. Mm-hmm. They can destroy the pro-life movement from within. Mm-hmm. The pro-aborts will never destroy us from outside. And so this is the reason that this is so important.
How do we identify them?
Just listen to what they say. Mm-hmm. You know, you'll know them by their fruits, right? You just listen to what they say. But when you have people coming out here saying the solution to the abortion thing is to shut down the pro-life movement and walk away, and then listen to us, we'll tell you, we've been in the bleachers all these years, but we're going to come down out of the bleachers and we're going to show you how this is done.
These people are real good about going to pro-life sites on Facebook or wherever and bashing us or starting
Right. Starting
dissension.
dissension.
Yeah.
You know, there was a situation here somewhere in southern Oklahoma. We talked about it a few weeks ago, not on the show, but a church up there that had really never been involved in the pro-life movement. Some people in that church had got the pastor on board and said, okay, we're gonna have some pro-life events here. And they called in a speaker for the pro-life movement to come in and just talk to the congregation, like I do, go out and give speeches or whatever. They were picketed
There was a group protesting. Yeah.
by some of these people.
Yep.
That church was picketed by some of these people that are claiming that the pro-life movement is a scam and needs to be shut down. Now, let me ask you this question. You're a pastor in one of these churches, and you've seen more of them than I have, and they're skittish anyway, and it's very difficult to get them to do anything, right?
Right.
All right. Now you kind of step out. You stick your toe in the water, and you say, okay, I'll let you bring in this pro-life speaker, and maybe we can get the church fired up about this, right? And then you're picketed by people who claim that this guy is a scam artist or that this guy's in it for the money and whatever. What's the chances of that church doing anything else on the pro-life effort?
They just poured water on that church.
That's zero.
Yeah.
That's a zero chance of that. So, and I have these people call me once in a while, and they start complaining about something that I'm doing or not doing or whatever it might be. The first thing I always ask them, I know you're laughing about this, as I stop them, I say, listen, okay, but I'll listen to your complaint, but before we go on, I want to hear something from you. So I know who I'm dealing with here. What are you doing? You know what the answer is? In every case I've ever done this,
I'm donating to you.
I'm doing nothing. No, they're not even doing that.
Oh.
They're doing nothing. They're doing absolutely nothing. And I always tell them the same thing. Well, you know what? I like what I'm doing better than what you're not doing. They can even call and complain about people that I don't have a lot of belief in the pro-life movement. And I'll always tell them the same thing.
What are you doing?
You have not earned the right to complain about what that person's doing. When you got skin in the games, when you come down out of the bleachers and your nose gets bloodied and you get dirt all over you and you get people threatening you and spitting on you and all that, then you've earned the right to complain. Then you've earned the right to criticize that person. But the interesting thing is, I've never had anybody, not one time, have I ever had either a local or national leader in the pro-life movement or just a regular pro-lifer who's actually involved. Even if they disagree with things that we do or positions I take or things I say, I've never had one of them call and complain. It's always the people who aren't doing anything. And it's always these Johnny-come-latelys who think they're the keeper of the flame. That's always the people that call and complain.
Sounds like a politician to me.
Yep, I know.
They talk a lot of pro-life with no action.
That's exactly right. And we've got to get beyond this at some point. But the main thing is, you say, what do you do about these people? You ignore them.
Yeah.
That's all you can do with them.
Right.
You just ignore them. All right. Now, what I want to do is I want to talk about people, instead of these nutcases that we were just talking about that don't do anything, I want to talk about the people that are doing something.
We want a happy segment.
Right. Let's do one of those.
All right.
I had a call the other night from a lady that's been a supporter of ours for years, and she's been on the sidewalks out in California. And she had called about a question she had and wanted me to help her with somebody she had counseled that day. She's a sidewalk counselor. And we got to talking a little bit, and she was telling me about how the projects and the materials that LDI puts out help them on the sidewalks. And so we got to talking about that. And she joins us today. Her name is Sharon Fullilove. Hello, Sharon.
Hi, Mark.
Thank you for joining us. I know it's early in California for you, and we appreciate your getting up so early.
Oh, that's quite all right.
Now, you're in Menifee, is that right? Menifee, California?
Yes.
Okay. And you told me that you've been going to the sidewalks at this abortion mill. Which abortion mill is it you go to?
Family Planning Associates in San Bernardino, which is about 40 miles away.
I was really impressed, Sharon, with some of the things that you said. One of them was that you guys are on that sidewalk religiously, so to speak, and that you keep a running list of all the babies that you've saved when you have a turnaround on the sidewalk. And the day that you called me, you'd had a turnaround that day. Is that correct?
That's right. That's right. We started in 2005 keeping track. Before that, the turnarounds had not been recorded.
So we're basically talking about during a 12-year period of time.
Right.
What is the count up to now?
As of today, 2,332.
Wow.
Is that amazing?
Amazing.
And
That is amazing.
A few we still have connections with, so it's wonderful.
Yeah. And again, the segment that we just got through doing, Sharon is part of the pro-life movement,
Yes, she is.
and she's very much a part of it. She's on the front lines.
Yes.
You know, if these people we had just been talking about a moment ago had their way, the 2,379 babies,
No,
32.
2,332.
those babies would be dead.
They would be.
Those babies would not have been saved. When you say that the pro-life movement has not accomplished anything, what you're saying is those babies don't count for anything. Those 2,000 babies that Sharon and her team have saved,
All of the babies that have been saved don't account
they
for
don't
one
count for
thing.
anything. The millions of them, millions.
Yep.
And Sharon, that's an extraordinary achievement.
Well, thank you. It's not me. It's the group that I'm with. And now that I'm older, we have the most marvelous sidewalk counselors who go on a regular basis. I just go occasionally when I'm able now.
Right.
Yeah,
Well,
you
what you've achieved is extraordinary. And what would you give to the listeners here as a tip to your success?
Well, before I ever open my mouth when I'm sidewalk counseling, I'll just ask the Holy Spirit to give me the words I need to say in order to get the people's attention. And it seems to work.
Amen.
Yeah.
Yes, it does.
You know, on a human level, what makes what Sharon does work and people like her is tenacity. You don't give up in the face of evil, and you don't give up in the face of adversity. And I know, Sharon, and you and I kind of talked about this one time, not this recent conversation, but one time before, that you have to endure a lot of things when you're on those sidewalks, and especially in a place like California.
And sometimes you don't see any turnaround. You don't see yourself saving any babies, and it gets probably discouraging and depressing. But you guys still push on. Y'all still get out there, and y'all still do what you are called to do, which is amazing.
I would call it expectancy, that your tenacity is tied to your expecting God to do something.
Amen. Hey, Sharon, you told Mark and I a story the other day with a guard. Can you tell us about that story?
Oh, yes. That was when I was there. And there was a new guard, a black man, and he was real tart with me. I mean, just really mean. And then the very next week I was there, and he came up to me and apologized and said, "I'm sorry I was rude to you last week. It's obvious that you're here for a good reason." And we got to talking, and he was pro-life. And I gave him all the Life Dynamics brochures about statistics on African Americans. He had mentioned that there were so many black women going in to have abortions. So I gave him all I had that day, plus a DVD, and I told him the next week that I would bring him a bunch more. And I did, but he was no longer there.
You gave him a Maafa 21?
I gave him Maafa 21, and then the brochure that you produce showing the statistics.
Right.
So the next week, he was no longer there, and I don't know what happened, whether he quit or whether they fired him. Maybe they saw him talking to me. Who knows?
Maybe he watched
God
that DVD that you gave him, and it convicted him.
Oh, he was already, when he talked to me the second time, he was already ready to quit, ready to do anything he needed to do to change the situation. It's like God touched him.
Right. When I was talking to you the other night, when you called and you were upset about, you weren't bragging about the one that you'd saved that day. You were upset about the one you hadn't saved, and that speaks to your heart on this matter. But
Well, it was one of our sidewalk counselors who had called me. She was just distraught because she said, I just didn't know what to tell him. So basically, I told her what you had told me later,
right,
that some people you just crazy.
you rejoice in the babies that you save,
Yeah.
and you can't beat yourself up. And I gave you the analogy of Oskar Schindler. We remember the
Oscar
movie
Schindler.
years ago, Schindler's List, and he was getting Jews out of Nazi-occupied Europe and trying to save them. And he actually created a list of people whose, whatever their circumstances were, he said, I can save this person, I can save this one, or this one I can't do anything about, so he didn't put them on the list, and that's where the name Schindler's List came from. And he was haunted, they said, right up till the day he died, about he had saved in excess of 2,000 Jews from being executed, but he was haunted about the ones he couldn't save, that he couldn't put on his list. And, you know, I can understand that you would have that feeling, but I think he should have rejoiced in the ones he did save. And that's you've sat there at that abortion clinic and it's one of the nastiest abortion clinics in the country, that whole chain that those people run. And you've saved over 2,300 babies, and you guys need to be focusing on that. You're doing what God called you to do. I don't know if you understood this or not, but one of the things when I was talking to you that was so encouraging to us, because we're going through some difficult times here at Life Dynamics right now, and it's going to change the organization. It already has, and it's going to some more in the future. We're dealing with some very bad financial issues. And sometimes you sit here, Sharon, and I'm sure we're kind of like you. You think, am I really making a difference here? Does this really matter? What difference would it make if I weren't even here? And one of the things that you said to me was how much Life Dynamics and Life Talk and our materials and so forth have meant to you guys, and how you use that stuff to help save these babies. And
to this day.
Yes.
This day, yeah.
And I just want to thank you for that and tell you how much that means to us, because it is sometimes difficult. You're on the front lines, and we're not. We're the suppliers, basically. We're the
Behind the scenes.
We're behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And so sometimes we don't see the actual fruits of our labors, like on MAFA 21. I mean, and we see a lot of it, but we don't see everything. You know, and had you not told me that you thought maybe this guy went home and watched MAFA and he said, hey, I'm not going to be a part of this, and he goes home, and he might become a pro-life activist. We don't know. He might be in that.
We have no way of knowing.
We have no way of knowing. But it was just really encouraging for me, especially at this time, for us here at Life Dynamics, to hear that. And it was like God sent you to be a light of encouragement, a point of encouragement for us. And I brought it up to Renee the next day. She had already gone the day you called. But I just want to thank you for that. I also want to thank you on behalf of those 2,300 babies and the 2,300 moms and the 2,300 dads who aren't having
grandkids now. I mean, we're talking years.
Right. And the 2,300 moms that don't have to go through the rest of their life knowing that they killed their own child.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's not just the baby that you saved, it's those moms too. And I can tell you that's not an insignificant thing. Renee and I talk all the time to the women that call here that have had abortions, and I can tell you the injury that they suffer in their hearts and in their minds and in their lives as a practical matter. I still remember that one that you talked to mostly that had her abortions 40 years ago. And she had two sons that she had never bonded with.
She couldn't bond with them, yeah.
She said because she basically felt like she didn't deserve them. They came along after her abortion, and she said, every time I looked at one of my sons when they were babies, I saw that baby that I aborted. And she said, I never could bond with them. Now her sons are in her 40s.
Yeah, she's repaired her relationship with them, though, or she's working on it.
She was working on it. But the reason that she was working on it is because of some things that we told her that day. She wasn't going that direction. She just was mentioning that I'm estranged from my sons over this, and that was going to be the end of it. And we told her how she could undo that.
Yeah.
And so the 2,300 babies are incredibly important, and they have to be the focus of this. But that's not the only benefit of what you've done there, Sharon. And on their behalf, I want to thank you, but also on behalf of us, because your call was a big encouragement for me.
Well, you know, your brochures are great, but also that Pro-Life Answers book has been invaluable to us. I had ordered a copy for each of our members, which I think were about 35 at the time. And what I'm doing now is I use email, and I give them one pro-life claim and one pro-life answer a week.
Well, good.
To let it sink in, just the one answer. And I'm having people calling me, can I get added to that list? So your Pro-Life Answers book is doing a great job. Plus, you had donated Lyme 5 books, I think a whole case.
Right. Well, we've got some cases of Lyme 5s left, and we're making them available to anybody that wants them. If they've got a use for them, we don't charge them for the books. All they pay for is the shipping.
That's right. And you gave a Lyme 5 book to each of our pro-life members, and then what was left over we had on our literature table.
Wow.
So we can't do what we do without you, and vice versa.
Well, that's right. It's a
We're
team.
all on God's team.
That's right. That's exactly right. And we need to make sure that distinction that you just made is very important for people to understand. I hear people say all the time, well, God's on our side. No, God is not on our side.
We're on his side.
We're on his side. God doesn't choose sides. We're on his side. And the way you said that a moment ago is exactly the way we need to remember this. This is not our movement. This is his movement. We're just the soldiers. We signed up. We're just grunts. We signed up to fight for the babies who can't defend themselves. And we fight wherever God put us. And God put you in one place, and he put me in one place, and he put Renee here, and he put Stephen there, and we fight. We bloom where we're planted. That has to be our philosophy. Well, anyway, Sharon, it's very nice talking to you again.
Thank you very much for everything you do.
And you get back out on that sidewalk and you save some more babies. You hear me?
God willing, I will.
And we'll be praying for you. We know you have some health issues that are plaguing you right now, and
I do.
Yes, you do.
God's in charge, and I hope I get to see at least the reversal of Roe versus Wade. That would, of course, California, it's not going to make much difference, but
Don't
other
worry.
places.
Let me tell you something, Sharon. When the time comes that you're not here, when you get to heaven, those babies that you've saved will be waiting for you.
Ooh, that's a wonderful thought.
Well, that's what's going to happen. I'm promising you, Sharon.
I believe you.
Well, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Mark. God bless you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you, Sharon.
Bye, Sharon.
God bless everybody.
All right. I want to talk about another pro-life hero that's on the streets, just like Sharon that we just had on the show.
Yes.
And before we get to her, I want to remind people of our Tanya Reeves project that we did. And we have a brochure out on this young lady.
Yes.
Tanya Reeves was a 28-year-old African-American young lady, went to an abortion clinic in Chicago and wound up dead. And I'm telling you, I've said this, and I will continue to say this. This was not malpractice. This was not an accident. Tanya Reeves was murdered by Planned Parenthood. Now, I'm telling you by this Planned Parenthood abortion clinic in Chicago. If that's not true, I'm inviting them to sue me. You know, I'm accusing them of a criminal act. This was murder, what they did to Tanya Reeves. If you read the statute in Michigan in Illinois, for depraved indifference murder, it sounds like it was written for this case. They perforated this young lady's uterus, and a perforated uterus is not necessarily fatal. Matter of fact, most times it's not fatal. It's rarely fatal. But that assumes that you get her medical care. They let this young lady, was it 5.5 hours?
Yes.
They let her lay in the hallway, and they even admitted she was hemorrhaging.
Stephen gauze up in her
Right.
continuously.
Yeah. They let her lay in that hallway, and she bled out.
Yep.
And they did that because they didn't want another ambulance pulling up in front of the abortion clinic with the pro-lifers out in the front.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, that's what's called depraved indifference murder. They murdered Tanya Reeves.
Yep.
And we tried to get the district attorney's office up there. We talked to the attorney general's office and tried to get them to file murder charges. They're just ignoring it. Tanya Reeves was poor and she was black. If she had been wealthy and white and her parents had attorneys, I guarantee you the people that did this would be in the Illinois State Penitentiary right now as we speak. You know that.
Absolutely.
There's no doubt about it. You're familiar with the Tanya Reeves.
Absolutely.
situation.
We got involved in that early on, the National Black Pro-Life Coalition, early on.
Right.
Yeah.
Anyway, we have a similar situation going on up in Michigan, a neighboring state, that except for the efforts of our guest that we're going to have on here in a few minutes, they would have swept her under the rug just like they were trying to do with Tanya Reeves. And joining us from Livonia, Michigan, is Lynn Mills. Hello, Lynn.
Hi, thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure, and you're an old friend of ours. Matter of fact, you came here for our first
IoT training.
IoT, the Intel operations training, and now you have the DVD. So,
I do.
So you're an old friend of, I don't want to say old, but you're a longtime friend of Life Dynamics. Let's put it that way.
I am.
Yeah.
I am.
I'm the oldest one here, so. Anyway, by far. Tell us about this young lady. Her name's Cree Erwin, is that correct?
Cree Erwin Shepherd, yes.
Okay. What happened in this situation? We only have about 5 minutes, but go ahead and update us what's going on,
Okay.
because there's
Well,
a massive cover-up going on up there.
Yes, and I don't know where it starts, but the medical examiner took 8 months when it's normally 3 to 6 months to put out the autopsy. The FOIA officer in Calhoun County, the neighboring county, did not want to release anything to Catherine, Cheryl Sullinger, or myself. He called us curiosity seekers.
Okay, let's make sure people understand. A FOIA is a Freedom of Information Act request, which is law.
Right.
This is not optional.
No, and he redacted all parts that concerned the abortion aspect of this. And we have been working on behalf of the family. We had the protest for Cree in late March, and I found on Facebook Cree's brother acknowledging how happy this wasn't being swept under the rug, that somebody was doing something for the family. So I reached out to him and said, with permission of your wife, please contact me. And he did. And I invited him up here to join us at a press conference. And when he came to the press conference, I said, please, can you bring the records from Bronson ER, because she went to the ER 2 days after the abortion, and the ER saw either blood clots or products of conception in there. All they did for her was calm her pain with some morphine. They gave her the drug, I don't have it in front of me, to stop her vomiting, sent her home with the plan of either going back after the long 4th of July weekend to Planned Parenthood or her own private physician. Within 18 hours, she was dead. Now, just 2 days ago, I finished the allegations to LARA, the licensing agency in Michigan, against Planned Parenthood, because that's where it starts, with the 4-centimeter rip in her uterus, against Laura Castleman, the abortionist we believe did that, and the ER doctor, I can't pronounce his name, that sent her home, that couldn't do the D&C and keep her in the hospital and keep her alive. This woman, this 24-year-old young lady who was black and working in a factory, who was a young mother, could be living today if those 3 people hadn't interfered in her life. And I want to make it very clear that Tyler, her brother, said she was sorry as soon as she had that abortion, that she regretted it, that the family is pro-life, and that she didn't want to tell her mother, but the pain was so horrible that she had to tell her mother to get to the ER. And that we're not done. We're filing allegations against the medical examiner for the fuzzy thinking and the way she wrote up the autopsy report and the death certificate. This is nothing but protecting Planned Parenthood, and we want the records from Planned Parenthood, and we're doing everything we can to help the family get those records. We're not done. This is not going to stand. We want justice for Cree. When I get off the phone with you, I am going to go see Pastor Reverend Ewell. I don't know if you've heard of him. He's going to be picketing the NAACP this weekend, and he wants my Justice for Cree and her baby signs, and he's going to be exposing to the NAACP what is wrong with abortion in America and how uneven it is and how they're trying to do away with the black population in this country.
Well, you know, Lynn, you're talking about Levon Ewell, Pastor Levon Ewell.
Yes.
He's in my Alpha 21.
Oh, yeah, he gets it. He knows.
Right. He understands this. He understood it before we explained it to him. He was one of the people that, when I was putting together the script from Alpha 21, he was one of the people I talked to. He already understood everything I was telling him.
He has his own pro-life organization that he's been involved in for years.
Right. But let's make a point here. You know, everything that happens in this country bad to black people is not a result of racism. Sometimes bad things just happen. But I'm going to tell you, in this case right here, and it's just like the Tanya Reeves case, if Cree was white and had middle class or upper middle class parents with money and could hire attorneys, this thing would be a totally different scenario than what it is right now.
I can't understand why they sent her home. She had a hole. They saw it. She had either a blood clot or baby parts, and they sent her home.
That's because they don't care. They don't want her dying on the spot, because then an ambulance has to show up. Lynn, that's the reason.
Their reputation
in
is
the-
on the line.
She was in the ER, and an ambulance showed up 2 blocks away at her mother's house.
Okay, but wait a minute. Lynn, one of the things that you need to be looking at here, because, and I know you already know this, but I'll make sure that the audience understands this. When you start investigating these abortion clinics, what you inevitably find is that they've got some sort of, usually unofficial, relationship with someone at a local emergency hospital to cover their tracks for them. And I would look out there and see how many other people have been injured, taken to this hospital that came from that clinic or had some connection with that clinic. Because I guarantee you, what you're describing to me is something we used to see all the time in our malpractice cases, that there was a particular emergency facility that was specifically there to cover the tracks of this abortionist. And that's why they sent her home. They don't want anything to reflect back on that abortion clinic anyway, either.
This was 1 county away, though. This was not the county that the abortion mill was in. I'll look into that, but
wait a minute. Had she died at that abortion clinic, at that emergency room, that would have been part of the official record. But if she died somewhere else, it wouldn't necessarily be. And
so did they figure she was going to die anyway?
I don't know if they figured that she was going to die anyway. What I'm telling you is they didn't care if she died anyway. And that's the same thing we saw with Tanya Reeves. When these people rolled Tanya Reeves, which they admitted they did, they knew she was hemorrhaging, not just bleeding, but she was hemorrhaging. They rolled her out of the procedure room into the hallway. They rolled her out of the procedure room because they needed it for more abortions. Mm-hmm. They continued doing abortions that day. They literally were walking past the gurney that Tanya Reeves was lying on, and they kept, like Renee was saying, they kept packing gauze into her to soak up the blood. She was hemorrhaging. They sat there and let her bleed out. Now, the fact is, they may not have known that she was going to die. They may not have predicted that she was going to die. They might have thought she was going to be okay. But the fact is, they didn't care. That's the bottom line here. They didn't care if this young 28-year-old woman bled to death. And what I'm telling you is, the people that you're dealing with, they didn't care either. It's not a matter of what they knew or didn't know. It's a matter of what they cared about. And that's depraved indifference. And if I were you, I would be looking, I don't know what the Michigan statute is on depraved indifference murder, but you can find it online and see if that might have some application here too. But I guarantee you, that's what killed Tanya Reeves. She was murdered. It was not medical malpractice, and it was not an accident. It was murder.
Well, my state senator has contacted me over this case and is interested. So I'm going to take these wise words that you have handed me, and I will have another conference with him on this. And he wants to help stop the funding of Planned Parenthood, and I will take it a step further with him. And I'm going to tell you, Cree's life is not disposable, and they're messing with the wrong people here in Michigan. This is a pro-life state. We've been a pro-life state going back to 1972 and beyond, and they're not going to get away with this.
Well, I know you're a fighter, so you keep it up, and please let us know of what developments come from as a result of this. And we've done our best that we can do to keep Tanya Reeves' name out there. We put out a brochure on it. We talk about it all the time. It's on Life Talk here. We can't let these people continue to sweep these women under the rugs like they've done for the last 44 years.
I will.
Thank you.
Absolutely will.
Thank you for joining us, Lynn.
Thanks, Lynn.
Thank you for having me, Mark, Renee, and Pastor.
Keep up the good work.
Yeah, we thank you for what you're doing up there.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
God bless.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
With people like Sharon and this, how can the other side beat us? And they can't. These people are going to do, Lynn, she's a fighter. You met her when she was here. And
tenacious, not going to give up, and that's what we need.
That's what we got to have.
Yep.
And it kind of goes back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier. The pro-aborts can't beat us. It's this internal garbage that can beat us. Mm-hmm. That's the people that can destroy these types of efforts.
Yep.
And that's why it's important to confront them. Just 2 real quick things, and we are way over on time. Lynn mentioned the IoT, the Intel operations training.
Yes.
People need to get those.
They do need to get them.
And we're getting out a lot of them.
Yeah, if people want to do something and get out there, and this is a good thing to do.
And it's something that anybody can do.
Yes.
Anybody can do.
Right.
Perfectly legal. and it can bring devastating results down on the pro-abortion side.
Fantastic information. It is worth viewing and having.
Right.
Yeah, it's a little over 4 hours, but it's
Yep.
good information, and you get a form with it as well.
All kinds of
So,
things.
yeah.
And, put together a little team of people that you want to do intel operations training. Let me tell you something, and this is the philosophy that all the stuff that we do, that we've done here going undercover, and that people like David DeLayden have done, and others out there that have done, Lila Rose. What you have to understand, and I've said this since day one, everything we need to know to beat the abortion industry is inside the abortion industry. And the question is, do we just sit around and wait for it to trickle out on its own, or do we go in and get it? And our attitude has always been,
We're going to go get it.
we're going to go get it.
Right.
And we want to put together an army of people. Those 550 abortion clinics need to have 550 teams of pro-lifers watching those places, because if you're watching them and you're doing the stuff that we're talking about in the intel operations training, you will get the stuff.
Yeah.
You will get the stuff that you need to shut them down.
Yes.
Earlier in the show, we talked about mentoring and training,
Right.
developing young people. This is an essential part of the training.
Right, exactly. And speaking of Life Talk, we've talked many times. We've already made a lot of changes to Life Talk. I went back and watched the first one the other day. It was kind of nostalgic for me. Zentra was on it, and it was, from a production value standpoint, it was pretty amateurish. We didn't really know what we were doing. And not that I'm claiming that we know what we're doing now, but we're better than we were then. And we've had a lot of changes over the years, and we're going to have some more, because some of the changes are going to be forced upon us by some things that are happening here. But also, we've been doing, and I want to encourage people to go and look at the Facebook Live that we've been doing. We're doing them 2 or 3 times a week now. And
It's on your Facebook page, Mark Crutcher,
right. And
or YouTube. You can go to YouTube,
well,
LifeTalkTV.
we created another one too, didn't we?
Well, yeah, we have a group called Real Pro Life Talk, and that has gotten a lot of traction.
Yep. Renee and I do them together, and they're between 5 minutes, and I think the longest one done is about 12 or
Yeah,
13.
12 or yeah,
Yeah, something like that.
yeah.
Great.
Short and sweet to the point.
Because people have short attention spans nowadays. They don't want to watch and something that lasts hours. And that's going to change how we do Life Talk as well. Changes are coming. And, it's kind of like when we went from VHS tape to DVD.
That was hard.
We got a lot of blowback on that. And we lost subscribers. People said, I'm not going to get DVD.
Well, people don't like change.
They don't like change.
Yeah.
But can you imagine if we were still putting Life Talk out on VHS tape?
They would look awful.
They would look awful, and the tapes would
Just the
still-
quality, yeah.
So
And we would not be talking to a large segment of the community.
yeah, we
Young
can't
people
even get
don't
them
have
duplicated
DHL.
anymore. We'd have to be duplicating them here ourselves. But the fact is, you have to change with the times, and
Right.
the times are changing right now, and we're going to make the changes that are necessary, because if we don't, then we perish, and we can't allow that to happen. So anyway, I just want to warn people that there will be changes coming to the way we do Life Talk. But right now, I want to encourage everybody to go to Facebook Live and watch these shows that we're doing, and they'll keep you posted on what's happening on a daily basis, because what we do is we peruse the news, and we see something that's hot or something that's trending, then we put in our 2 cents
talk about it, yeah.
about that.
Yep.
About that issue. So anyway, this is a great show, guys. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
And we'll be back again next month, I guess.
You bet.
Anyway, that's all the time we have. Until next month, remember, Life Dynamics is not here to put up a good fight. We're here to win, because winning is how the killing stops. We'll see you next month.